Good afternoon to everyone. We wanted to thank the 8th International Week of Science, Technology and Innovation for the opportunity of presenting our work in this conference. My name is Danae Chipoco, and today I'm going to talk about the scientific insights of electrochemical replacement approaches to explain the origin of pre-Columbian Peruvian gilded copper-based objects. This research work was done along with Dr. Aníbal Alviz-Meza and María Inés Velarde in the Centro para Investigación y Conservación del Patrimonio. First, I'm going to give a little introduction on this topic. We are going to talk about the gilding techniques from ancient Peruvian metalworkers, then give a brief historical and geographical context in which these cultures developed, and finally introduce the protocol of electrochemical replacement by Heather Lechman. Ancient Peruvian metalworkers developed various gilding techniques, such as electrochemical replacement, depletion gilding, among others. As you can see in Figure 1, the gilding was uniform across the whole sample, and only some parts were on purpose left with copper. These gilded objects were part of elite customs that expressed and consolidated the power of important rulers and priests. They made up ritual paraphernalia and had various uses, as you can see in Figure 2 from this viscous gilded copper mask. Gilded copper objects are still undergoing severe corrosion process, even though they have been recovered from burial sites and taken into museums where they have special care. Now then, understanding the gilding technique is essential for two main reasons. The first one, to enrich the knowledge on the ending metallurgic development. And second, and most importantly, to develop adequate conservation strategies to ensure the preservation of metal cultural heritage. Electrochemical replacement was one of the techniques developed in the pre-Columbian Peruvian civilizations. One that shared this technique were the Moches, Vicus, and Recuay. They developed in the northern coastal deserts and highlands of Peru between 100 and 800 after Christ. In Figure 3, we can see the map of some archaeological sites found from these cultures. Here we can see Vicus and Moche Loma Negra. Some research work have been done in these archaeological sites. In yellow, we can see the Zipan Huasca Rajada, and in orange, Dos Cabezas, which is a archaeological site that we are going to refer further in our presentation. And in the southwest part of this map, we can see the Parashas of Recuay. The pre-Columbian Peruvian history is divided into horizons and intermediates, depending on the cultures that were developed at the time. In the case of Moches, Vicus, and Recuay, they developed in the late early intermediate and they decay at the beginning of the medium horizon. Heather Lechman was the first to identify and recreate the use of electrochemical replacement as a gilding technique. She described very well a protocol that I'm going to present right now. She used 3 salts. These 3 salts were known by ancient citizens in this part of Peru. She used a 1:1:1 mass ratio with a concentration of 0.1 grams per milliliter. These salts were potassium nitrate, potassium aluminum sulfide, and sodium chloride. She dissolved them in water. Then add the gold until a concentration of 0.051 molarity, and also sodium bicarbonate until a pH of 9 was achieved. Then she boiled gently for 5 minutes and then immersed the copper coupon previously prepared for 5 minutes to achieve a thickness of 1 micrometer. Due to the strength of the gold depletion on the copper, an annealing process was required to increase this strength and to avoid the gold from falling from the copper coupon. That's why he described an annealing in atmospheric air at about 850 degrees Celsius for 5 to 7 seconds. This process created anodic regions, which means copper oxide, that were afterwards removed with the same salt solution. It is important to notice that there are some specifications lacking in this protocol, like the temperature of the process and the exact concentration of sodium bicarbonate to achieve the pH of 9. That's why the first objective of our work was to obtain the missing experimental data to recreate Lehmann's protocol developed decades ago. Moreover, we wanted to study in more depth this electrolysis process. For this, we present a methodology that I'm going to talk now. First of all, I'm going to present our Gelding technique and then the characterization techniques that we used to study this process. We use the same salts as Heather Lehmann did, but we use less concentration. Now, we read literature, and for electrolysis deposition, they usually have electrolytic bath with different salts at a concentration of 0.08 molarity. Because Heather Lehmann used 1:1 ratio, this molarity was transformed into mass using the molecular weight of sodium chloride because it was the lightest one among the three salts that Heather Lehmann used. This gave a concentration of 0.047 grams per milliliter. Then we dissolved a gold precursor that was also described by Lehmann, and it's important to notice that we use less molarity, less concentration of this gold precursor, 0.01 molarity. Then we add sodium bicarbonate, 0.13 molarity, to give us a pH slightly above 9, between 9.1 and 9.3, depending on the temperature in which the pH measurement was taken. Then, to have an homogeneous mixture solution, what we did was to use a magnetic peel to stir for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Then we heat the solution to 80 degrees Celsius in order to have a whole temperature for the process. In order to determine this temperature, we based on literature that said that an optimal temperature was between 80 and 90 degrees Celsius. At 90 degrees Celsius, the water starts evaporating faster, and that gave us non-uniform gilding. Therefore, we decided to use 80 degrees Celsius. After the solution was ready, we immersed the copper coupon previously cleaned with ethanol and acetone in an ultrasonic bath for 3 to 6 minutes. What we did was to immerse the copper coupon halfway. After 3 minutes, we left it, and after 6 minutes, we totally removed it. This allowed us to have the same conditions for the 3 and 6 minutes test. It is important to notice that we use less gold precursor than Lehmann originally did and establish a concentration of sodium bicarbonate to achieve the pH above 9. The characterization techniques that we used were, first of all, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to determine the elemental composition. In the image over here, we can see a typical XRF spectra. In the x-axis, we can see the element composition. The energy of the electrons were measured, and this relates directly to the element that is found in the sample. The intensity of the measurement is direct related to the concentration of this element found in the sample. We also use optical microscopy that allows the examination of microscopic features that were really important for our study. Finally, we use a scanning electron microscope to analyze archaeological objects found in Dos Cabezas sites. This allowed the examination of morphology and the thickness of the gilded. Now I'm going to talk about our results. We are going to start talking about the electrochemical replacement and how it gives rise to anodic regions, then how the dipping time to stop the reaction goes beyond 6 minutes, and finally a comparison of objects found in Dos Cabezas archaeological site with the results that we obtained with this protocol. The electrochemical replacement gave rise to anodic regions because of the replacement reaction itself. The gold ions were in the electrolytic bath, and for them to reduce and to gild the copper needed to oxidize. This reaction has a limit. When all the surface of the copper has been oxidized and covered by the gold, then the reaction can proceed longer. In figure 4, we can see the result of our gilding. The reaction, as I already mentioned, stops when the copper is totally oxidized or when the potential is uniform throughout the coupon. Thus, anodic zones must be totally covered. As you can see from figure 4, there were still anodic regions seen in the 6-minute region. Below the green dotted line, we can see the 6-minute region, and in different corners, you can see these anodic regions. In general, between the 3 and the 6 minutes, you can see uniform plating throughout the immersed piece. Above the blue dotted line, you can see a bath-air interface. This was created when the water vapor from this electrolytic bath generated this oxide of the copper. It is important to notice that this anodic region suggests that the reaction could have gone even further than 6 minutes, since these anodic zones were still left uncovered. Another evidence of the reaction going beyond 6 minutes was the XRF results. On figure 5, we can see the spectra. In the case of figure 5a, we can see the spectra of the 3-minute sample. These peaks are corresponding to copper and this one to gold. Then you can see for the 6 minutes the same spectra here and here for coupon and here for gold. The elemental composition showed that the 6-minute doubled the content of gold in the 3-minute sample. This means that also the reaction could have gone even further. In order to analyze better our results, we compared them to archaeological objects found in Dos Cabezas archaeological site. Heather Lechtman described tiny anodic zones surrounded by large cathodic areas. This is very curious because that means that corrosion process could have started without much difficulty at that time. Having into consideration that these cultures were developed in the northern coastal region of Peru, where in most of the sites there are a lot of high humidity and salt conditions because of the ocean nearby. Now then, this means that perhaps they would have to re-gild the samples because of the oxide rising. Even more, in the burial sites where these archaeological objects were found, there were a lot of corrosive agents such as chlorine, which means that perhaps we could have seen more copper corrosion in these conditions. As you can see in figure 6, which is a figure of the objects found in Dos Cabezas, especially in figure 6c, you can see all the solid diffusion of copper oxide through the gold film, scratching and plating, the plating and erupt from it. And you can see also from figure 6a that this corrosion expands throughout the whole piece. Regarding the thickness that Heather Lechtman described was of about 0.5 to 2 micrometers for the gold layer. But as you can see from figures 6b and 6d, the thickness of the gold layer that was found in Dos Cabezas was about 10 micrometers, which is more than the one Heather Lechtman reported with this technique. Overall, our work was able to recreate Heather Lechtman's protocol, but also to use less reagents in this recreation, especially less gold precursor for the electrolytic bath. We used 0.08 molarity for sodium chloride. It was the lightest one among the 3 salts. And we also determined the concentration of sodium bicarbonate to achieve a pH above 9, 0.13 molarity. Even more, we established the temperature at which this process was done at 80 degrees Celsius. XRF and uncovered anodic regions show that the maximum deposition time could have gone beyond the 6 minutes, having into consideration that Heather Lechman reported this thickness in about 5 minutes. The deposited gold was added and covered uniformly the substrate. Therefore, we didn't go further into the annealing of the sample, even though we could have done that. And it's definitely something that perhaps in the future must be done. Also, we have visible anodic regions that were found that could have stimulated the accelerated deterioration of the copper, having into consideration all the environmental humidity and salt concentration, and also the corrosion agents found in burial sites. The thickness of gold in some archaeological samples exceeds the one achieved with this electrolytic bath. If we compare the ones reported by Lechman that were 0.5 to 2 micrometers with the ones compared with Dos Cabezas that were about 10 micrometers. Thus, other gilding techniques could have been used, but further research is needed in order to say this and also other studies on corrosion are needed because the copper samples at Dos Cabezas were really corroded. Then a conclusion from the comparison of these ancient pieces with the one we recently created is really difficult. We wanted to thank Professor Juan Carlos Rodriguez Reyes, Dr. Karsten Bendorf, and Dr. Ishmat Shah for all their fruitful scientific discussions that helped us in this research. Also to Dr. Andrés de Leo for all his support using the optical microscope. Then Karina Vizurraga is acknowledged for all the administrative support. Andrea Arana, Mario Carvajal, and the whole Department of Chemical Engineering at UTEC are acknowledged for all the help in the logistics. Also, this research was funded by Concitec and Banco Mundial by the project Mejoramiento y Ampliación de Servicios del Sistema Nacional de Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación Tecnológica. This is the bibliography that we consulted for this research work. Thank you very much for your attention.